Hello, this is BJ, and thank you for joining me for another edition of Read It Again. Glad you're here. Thank you also for hitting the like and subscribe button right below. As you can see, once again, I am not traveling today. I'm not going to be doing any other traveling until I make my larger trip into Bethlehem, which is less than a week away. So it might be the next blog or vlog. It might be one more after that. However, I didn't want to wait until then to start putting some more material out. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you some images and I'm going to show you some photos from a trip I took to C-Day in April this year. So it was a couple months back. C-Day is a small city, very old city. It's close to Antalya. It's very close to Antalya, and Antalya would be when Paul landed in Turkey for his missionary journey. When he landed in the Anatolian province, he landed in the city of Antalya. So C-Day is just probably 10, 15 miles, I think, to the east of there, right along the Mediterranean coast. And when I was in C-Day, what I was doing is every day I basically plotted out about a 6-mile loop that I would walk. And I would put some music on and just walk this loop and then take photos of whatever captured my attention. And in this loop that I was doing, I would start out by going through the ancient city. And the city's mostly, I think it hit its peak right around 500 or 600 AD. And the church that's there was built about late 5th century, so late 400s, and was used as a church right up till about 700 AD. I forget the actual numbers, the specific numbers, but it was used as a church for 250 years or so. And so there's that old church, there's the old amphitheater, there's some of the old other buildings that are very ancient that are there. And then once you pass by the ancient city, you're moving into what I would call the classical city. Now, all the buildings here are modern, but they continue to build and rebuild in what would be the Turkish version of a Victorian era style. So everything has this feel of being about 100 to 200 years old. Even though the buildings aren't that old, they have that look and that feel. It's a very touristy area, but it's really nice, and it's got some great restaurants in that area. Once you pass the classical city, then I would walk up the beach a bit, enter right into the southern edge of the modern city, and then head back to my hotel. So I was doing that loop every day, and you'll see some of the pictures from that. But the book I want to talk about, the purpose of Read It Again is to pick out some of the greatest books in literature, some of the books that I've read that have impacted me, or books that I felt have impacted society, and to just look at these books and to read them again and then talk about my impressions from those. So the book I'm doing today, and also if you have a book that you would be interested that has impacted you, or that you'd love for me to maybe read for the first time and then talk about, go ahead and leave it in the comments below. But the book I'm talking about today is, what book am I talking about today? Yes, Plato's Republic. Sorry, mind blank there for a second. But I'm talking about Plato's Republic. Now, a couple things that this has really impacted. First of all, many of the biblical scholars, many of the early church fathers were very familiar with both Plato and Aristotle, especially Aristotle. However, they ended up reading scripture through the lens of Plato. So, for example, the idea that the human body, or that humanity is made up of a spirit, a soul, and flesh, or a spirit, soul, and body, that's really more of a Platonic viewpoint, or a Platonic worldview, than it is a biblical worldview. And that's not the way the biblical writers viewed humanity, and not the way the biblical authors viewed humanity, so much as it is Platonic view. And I'm not saying it's necessarily wrong, but it's not. Many times we're reading that into scripture when it's not supposed to be there. So Plato has influenced the church in that, but Plato has also influenced society, and Plato's influenced literature. How many of you have ever read a utopian type book, or any of you have ever read even the very idea of utopia? Plato's Republic, the book we're looking at, is really the first utopian society that was created, or that was thought up. And also it is the very first book that could be considered pure political science. What does the ideal society, or what does the best society, or the best city, or the best government look like? That's what the Republic is getting at. And so there are many ways that he's influenced, many ways that Plato has influenced the world. Another way that's really one of the cities I was hoping to actually film this from is a city called Iskenderun, which is just a couple hour drive from me. I love going to that city and walking along the coast. Again, the Mediterranean coast, this is where I would go just to think or to get away or to escape for a day or two. I would always go to Iskenderun. Iskenderun is basically, that's Turkish for Alexandria. It was a city that Alexander built when he reconquered this area, when he freed Ionia from the Persian rule. That happened right here. And Alexander was the student of a man named Aristotle. Aristotle was a student of a man named Plato. So you can really say the entire Hellenic world that shaped and everything that Alexander did was influenced by his teacher, who was influenced by his teacher, who would be Plato. So that's just one other way that the world has been shaped by Plato. But in the book Republic, what Plato is really doing is it starts out with Plato is really using the voice of Socrates. And so in the book Socrates, it starts out with Socrates is coming back from a festival with a couple other guys, one of them being Glaucon, who would have been Plato's older brother. But they are coming back from some religious festival, and the question gets raised, what is justice? And what does justice really look like? Is it just doing good to your friends and doing evil to your enemies? That was like the initial thought. This is what justice is. And from there, they went on and expanded into that. And as they were doing so, they started looking at, is justice something that everybody thinks they should do, but they really don't want to? That's another question that came up, is like, do people, would they rather be unjust, but they will be just because everybody's looking at them? You know what I mean? So some of these questions are raised. Socrates, Plato's, using Socrates to speak, Socrates then goes into describing what the ideal city would look like. And he talks about the different aspects of the city. And he has these rulers, he calls them the guardians, but really they're basically philosophers. And because Socrates and Plato are philosophers, obviously they want philosophers to rule their city. So they have these philosophers ruling the city, but then they have each group in their own area, and they would have the soldiers, and how do you train the soldiers, and what should the soldiers look like? And Plato is really against the arts and the creative arts. And so he said, all of those artists and poets, and they're not really benefiting society in any way. So let's get all of them out of the city. And he had that perspective. And also, what should the craftsmen do in the city? Should they have money, or should they use a barter system? And all these things that he's talking about in the city. And it all is coming back to, what would a just society look like? Now, in one sense, you could say that Plato, and through Plato, Socrates, were very progressive, because they said women can be in the army and women can do any of these jobs. Women philosophers can be part of the guardians and ruling the city. However, they also have some very archaic views of the women's roles and men's roles, and there's that. So it's interesting, and there's some really good stuff in there. I would encourage you, if you've never read it, to read Plato and to read Plato's Republic. But one of the things that kind of caught me, and I'm going to pull it up here in 1 second. I'm sorry, I said one, but really two of the things that really caught me. One is Plato kind of walks through the different other types of government, and he talks about the oligarchy and how the oligarchy would then devolve into a republic. The oligarchy would devolve into a democracy, and the democracy would then fall into a tyranny. And Plato is really very anti-democratic. Much more so than, I knew this, but when I was reading it again, I realized he is a lot more anti-democratic than I remembered. But then I started thinking about it. So were most of the founding fathers of America. And when you look at what they were saying about democracy and what they were saying, they viewed democracy as mob rule. And America was founded to be a republic. Again, this falls back on Plato. America was founded to be a republic, not a democracy. So that's something to keep in mind, that really America is not a democracy. In some ways we are, but we're really much more of a republic than we are a democracy. And that's, Plato did found that or set that up as the ideal form of government, at least in that form. But also, when you're looking at how he was talking about the progression of one to the other, it's almost as if Plato was reading back the history of Rome. and the how Rome descended. It began with the Republic and the Roman Republic in the Senate. But then all of this chaos started coming with the Gracchi brothers and Marcellus and Sulla and all of that. And it was descending almost really into anarchy more than democracy. And then along came Julius Caesar and really set up the tyranny that follows that. And it's almost as if I was wondering if we didn't really have the history set down, how many scholars today would say that Plato had to have written his book after Rome, simply because it shadows what happened in Rome so well. But the other thing that really struck me was in book 2, when they before they even began to talk about the ideal city or the ideal republic, when they were talking about justice and the idea that absolute, how does it go? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. That's an idea that is really born out of this book as well. And I would just want to read a portion. Let me find it. And I'm going to read a little bit here and see if you can't spot. It might be a little hard to spot, but see if you can't spot the similarities with another famous story I'll probably be talking about later on. But this is Glaucus talking to Socrates, and he says, they relate that he was a shepherd in the service of the ruler at the time of Lydia, and that after a great delusion of rain and an earthquake, the ground opened and a chasm appeared in the place where he was pasturing. And they say he saw and wandered down into the chasm. And the story goes that he beheld other marvels there, and a hollow bronze horse with little doors, and he opened them and saw a corpse within, as it seemed, more than of mortal stature. And there was nothing else but a gold ring on the hand, and he took this off and went forth. When the shepherds held their customary assembly to make their monthly report to the king about the flocks, he also attended, wearing the ring. So as he sat there, it chanced that he turned the ring towards himself, towards the inner part of his hand. And when this took place, they say he became invisible to those who sat by him. They spoke to him as absent, and he was amazed. And again, while fumbling the ring, turned it outwards, and so he became visible. On noting this, he experimented with the ring to see if it possesses virtue, and he found the result to be that when he returned the ring inwards, he became invisible, and whenever he turned it outwards, he became visible. Becoming aware of this, he immediately managed to do things, so he became one of the messengers who went up to the king. And on coming there, he seduced the king's wife, and with her aid set on the king, and slew him, and took the kingdom. If now there should be 2 rings, and the just man should put one on, and the unjust the other, no one could be found, it would seem, of such adamantine temper as to persevere in justice, and endure to refrain his hands from the possessions of others, and not take them, though he might with impunity take what he wished from the marketplace, and enter into houses, and lie with whom he pleased, and slay and loose bonds from whomever he would, and in all things conduct himself among mankind as equal to a god. And in so acting, he would be no different from any other man, but both would pursue the same course. And this is yet a great proof, one might argue, that no one is just of his own will, but only from constraint. So here Glaucon is talking about what if there were 2 of these rings, and one was given to a good person, and one was given to an evil person, and how over time the good person would end up becoming just as evil as the evil person was from the start, and how justice will not constrain him when he has the power to break that. So this idea of putting on a ring and having that ring slowly corrupt even the best of men, I'm not sure where I heard that, but I do, wait. Glaucon later on talks about, where's the name? There was a name. Here it is. Glaucon says that the name of the just man was Bilbo Baggins. My name is BJ. Read it again.